During this video, I'm going to attempt to go through the American political system. No easy feat, I can assure you, because it's quite complicated, but I will just set up what I need and then we can dive in and get started. So, very much if you've watched the American influence video, this one should be, she says, a little bit shorter, but I do talk a lot, so I'll do what I can. Do remember to pause and go for a tea break, juice break, whatever it is, get fresh air, all of that, you know. Do genuinely take care of yourself, please, as you watch these and use these. So, I'm going to try and condense the American political system. Again, as I said in the last video, if you didn't watch it, I'm just making kind of throwbacks to it. Don't panic if you don't watch it, it will still make sense by itself. You have to state at the beginning, I have studied America, I've studied US, I've studied United States. Don't care how you word it, but you have to make it clear the world power that you've studied. What I'm also going to say here, that I didn't say in the other video, when you open the exam paper, there are two sets of questions, world powers and world issues. You have done world power. The reason I state that is, don't go and write an essay about a world issue on America, because a world issue is what we did at National. Things like COVID or the Russian-Ukraine crisis. You've done a world power, international power. Make sure you do the right section. So, what kind of questions can come up in this study theme? This one did come up last year, and as you'll see, 2023, government decision-making is dominated by one branch of government or political institution. These questions can have a habit of sounding complicated. Again, you need to break down what is it looking for in that question. So circle the word, underline it, what is your key phrase? So for example, there, I would be thinking dominated is a key word, okay? That is because it's thinking about which one has most control and has control over the others in the majority of the time. One branch of government, this is where you need to be thinking, what would our branches of government? Executive, judicial, legislative, okay? 2019, to what extent is it dominated? It is almost the same. It's just a discuss versus a to what extent. In your to what extent, I would be making sure that you've got good evaluative language. It is very dominating. This shows the executive is the most or the least or is somewhat in the middle. I think about those words. There are tips on evaluative and analytical language on your Google Classroom. I literally put the slides up at the start of the year. You need to go and look at them, okay? And then you've got things like the political system provides an effective check on government, and there's a few other different question types, but majority of the time, what you're going to be looking for are these. I would recommend for this that you have one concrete paragraph per section. I'm about to go through how I would do this. Now remember, I'm going to take you through my version. Yours might be slightly different, and that is absolutely fine. There are multiple ways you can gain full marks. There are multiple ways you can get 20 out of 20 or 12 out of 12. I'm just going to give you a worked example because I tend to find that that's what you guys have benefited most from. Again, executive, legislative, judicial. You need to be recapping that terminology. You need to be confident in what those words mean, because even by explaining those words properly, you can get knowledge marks on your essay. If you can tell me who makes up the executive and why it's powerful, that's marks. If you can tell me what legislative is, why it's powerful, and so on. The way that I remember it is exec is like the executive of a company, the CEO, the chief executive officer. The chief executive officer, the CEO, is in charge of everything. President, vice president. Legislative is to do with legal. Legal is to do with laws. People make laws. That's their parliament. Now, they don't call it parliament. It's Congress over there. But if that's the stepping stone, so legal, law, who makes laws? Parliament, so on. And judicial starts with the judge. It's the Supreme Court and its judges. You need to figure out one way that you can remember those, okay? So, this is the diagram. Now, I don't have this word for word in my head. And obviously it's got Trump there. You can tell by the shade they've used for his lovely foundation face. And his quiff, obviously, because it's Trump. We love Trump. It would be Biden now. However, the facts still stand. This is still how the American government operates, okay, and how things and decisions are made. I keep a version of this in my head. It's a very slimmed down version, but this means if you go into the exam and this question's there and you want to write this question, you can do a quick sketch at the top of your answer book, exec, jud, leg, and then you can score it out when you're done. You are allowed to plan in your answer books, just please score them out when you're finished. It doesn't have to be like tipexed and within an inch of its life. Literally a big X through it is all it needs, or a big squiggly line so that we know not to mark it. Now, if I was going to choose to do this essay, and it's me, so it's probably a high chance that I would pick this if it came up because it's to do with politics, I personally would be picking to argue the executive is the most powerful. Now, that's my choice. You might say it's judicial, you might say it's legislative. Both, all can be correct. I'm going to pick executive because personally, I find that easier to argue for. You will see on the left-hand side there what I am recommending you would then base your paragraphs on. If you had a 12 marker, keep it simple. Which one is the most effective? Okay, if it's, for example, if the question was evaluate one branch of government, this would work. Because what you would do is pick your executive, why it's powerful, why it's limited, and you would just have to flip one of the paragraphs. I will explain what I mean, don't panic. Let's start with the 20 marker. 20 marker here, I would be doing one Peel paragraph on, here's why the executive is powerful, but say who limits them. I might pick, explain what the executive is, literally tell me who's in the executive, president and vice president. They are in charge, they are elected by the people for a 4-year term. That kind of stuff can get you a mark because you're explaining what the branch of government is. Give me an example of something that they do. So the executive has one power, which is to introduce executive orders. Tell me what an executive order is. Tell me what that is. See, for that one, that first paragraph, pick a power of the president. Tell me what the executive is and who's in it. That can get you a mark, that if it's detailed. Pick a power of the president and explain what the power is. That can give you a mark. Give me an example of the power of the president. Give me a real world example of, I'm going to say him because we've only ever had male presidents. Give me an example of something he has done. That is 3 marks already. Then tell me why that makes him powerful. Why does that give the ball in their court? Why does that mean people don't want to annoy them? Why does that mean that they have all the power and people are scared of them? Then what you want to see, because that's potential up to 4 marks now. Sorry, I'm changing hands. 4 marks. Remember to pause if you need to think this through step by step. So you've done what the executive is. You've explained that, you've given me a power of the president in detail, you've given me an example of the president doing this, and you've given me a why for why that makes them powerful. Then tell me who can stop them in their tracks. However, spin it, remember to flip your paragraph. However, the legislative can actually do blah, 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 blah. Or the judicial can decide that that is unconstitutional, or it goes against the Constitution. Okay, you should know Constitution, go back, the rules and laws of America, it cannot go against that. It absolutely cannot. That's like their golden rule. So what I then do is my however is, however, here is how the president is limited. Here is how they can face impeachment. Give me an example if you really want to bump up your marks on this, and then evaluate. Therefore, this means that the executive branch is very powerful, almost completely. Never fully completely, quite powerful, a little powerful. Where's your evaluation? And tell me why. What I would then do, if this was a 20 marker, I would then go and say, here is an example. However, another branch of the government is the legislative branch. Tell me what the legislative branch is. Who's in it? Congress, House of Representatives, Senate. Can you remember a fact about how many? There are over X amount of people in Congress. What is their main role? Creating laws, deciding budget. Okay. So again, I'd explain legislative. Tell me who's in that, who's involved in that. Give me a power of the legislative. Give me an example of this in action. Tell me why that makes them powerful. Then, because if this is a 20 marker, I am going to argue the executive is most powerful, I am going to use the executive as my however here. So I've done all this for my legislative, then I'm going to go, however, the executive has the power to stop them because the president can veto laws. I would explain what I mean by that. If I have an example, I would give an example, and then I would evaluate. Therefore, this means the executive is more powerful than the legislative since. So this works if I am arguing throughout the executive is most powerful. That's why you need to pick and stick to a line of argument. I would then do the same with judicial. Here is how the judicial is powerful. Here is how the judicial, here's an example of it in power. The most obvious example here is overturning Roe versus Wade. You don't have to use that one. I appreciate it can be triggering for many, many people, so please don't hurt yourself with your revision, depending on circumstances. But think about what's been in the news about them. They've been everywhere. So if I was doing judicial, explain what the Supreme Court is, explain why it's significant. It can't go against the Constitution. It is to protect it. Tell me how many people are on there. There are 9. They serve for life. Give me an example of a power it has. Give me an example of that in action. Tell me why that makes it powerful. Then my however, the executive can, excuse the pun, trump them because blah, 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 blah. Okay. So that's a 20 marker. And as I said, for a 12 marker, you would just pick 2 of those strongest paragraphs, or you can flip it. So you would say, you would do your normal, if it was executive, executive's the most powerful. Then you might go here, the executive is also powerful because it can limit the legislative branch. The legislative branch involves Congress. This is made up of House of Reps and Senate. They have the power to do this. For example, the reason executive can limit them is blah, blah, blah. So all you would have to do is in your essay state, if it asks for one branch, make sure you talk about the power that it has. What I have done here is given you a little grid. I'm not going to talk you through this. It's on the slides. You can do that in your own time. You can make a copy of this if you want to add to it or put it in your jotter. But again, remember, what is the thing, an example of it, who limits it, an example of it being limited. That is a cheat sheet for you. I've also on these slides, because I'm that good to you, giving you some introductory help. I've given you some sentence starters. I've also given you some ideas on how you can put some analysis in there. So in terms of American politics, although there is a lot to it, it's not a straightforward essay. Think about which factor, which branch you are going to pick for your biggest one and use that in each of the paragraphs. In your conclusion, you really want to hammer home which one is powerful or which one is limited. Don't just assume that the marker knows. You really have to make that clear. Hope it helps.